Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Thank you again for joining us. New episode of Maximize Monday. And as you can see, I have a new guest with me, Joy. Joy, thank you so much for taking some time. I know your schedule has been hectic these past few weeks, so I appreciate you carving some time out to sit in the chair with me and kind of discuss recruiting, what got you into it, and everything else going on in your world.
My pleasure, Matt. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course, of course. So if you've watched the show, we'll start off what's motivating me. And if you've watched the show where you can see all the wrestling stuff behind me, you know wrestling is life for Matt. So this week is some pretty important stuff coming up. So Monday, for the first time in a while, Central PA is going to get an episode of Monday Night Raw. So my friends and I will be in attendance to see live professional wrestling. It's been a while for myself to go out to one of the WWE shows. So I'm pretty excited to just kind of get to spend some time with the boys and watch some guys throw each other around in the ring and some ladies, and just kind of enjoy that. And then coming up on the weekend then is the premium live event. So I've been trying to get my daughter into wrestling. She's not having it right now. She's 3, so I don't blame her. But this Saturday, one of the other motivations, it's Dad-Daughter Day. My wife is going to be going to a concert with her friends. So this is the day I'm going to like throw on the wrestling shirts that I force her to wear. And we're going to try to sit down and watch some of it. We'll see how long she lasts this time through. But she knows that on like Dad-Daughter days, we're already going to do like the market and the library. And I'll probably shower her with other gifts as well. So hopefully that will buy some time for us to enjoy wrestling. We'll see. But the other thing that I'm contemplating, so we do a family movie night every Friday, and my daughter is not ready for the movie theaters yet. I know this, and I wouldn't expect her to be. She's going on 4, so but she's really into the videos for the new Little Mermaid. I got her one of the new Little Mermaid dolls that they had at the local department store, and she carries around with her all the time. So I'm thinking that maybe I might test it, see how she does. Like we can try to do a matinee on Saturday when like the other parents are taking their kids that aren't movie theater ready just yet, and we can all just kind of experience this together. And if she's not into it, not having it, doesn't want to sit still for the 90 or 120 minutes that it is, then so be it. But we'll try. So we'll see. I'm contemplating that. So by next week, if like I look rugged and just exhausted, you know that Matt took his daughter to a Disney movie in theaters and it did not go well. So that's what's going on in personal life. And the professional side of things, goals for the week ahead. So I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago. We have an internship program within the company that we kind of retooled this year and have gotten some exciting new internships going. So I filled 2 of our internships, and this week I want to make sure I'm touching base with them. It's kind of that time for college students, like the semester's over, they're probably exhausted, tired, ready to just forget about things for a while. So just touching base with them, making sure they're still good to go in a week or two when we have the internship ready to start up. And then the other thing for me, this week my schedule was pretty packed. So looking ahead into the future with a holiday weekend coming up, usually I try to go in advance and get the next week kind of packed up too. So that's what I'm looking to do, is just kind of get the short week even more packed, because I'm losing that day of calls, recruitment efforts, everything like that. So get all of that on board. And my win, it's not actually for last week. We're looking a little into the future. So this coming Wednesday will mark my 2nd year with Novolex. So just pretty excited about that overall in terms of the growth I've had as a recruiter since I started there. Moved from agency recruiting to corporate recruiting. So now that I have 2 full years under me, it's just kind of seeing what I can do to continue to grow as a recruiter in the 3rd year. So still a win. And I can't say enough about the company. Obviously, I'm still here, still preaching about how much I enjoy it every week. So I'm looking forward to what the next year will bring for me. So that's my win. Joy, what is going on in your world this week ahead?
Wow, that was amazing. I don't know how I can follow that up, but let's see. So, work has been very busy, which is great because we know a lot of people are currently seeking employment. So, I'm happy to be able to help in that area. So, that's definitely positive. I am looking forward to the holiday weekend that's coming up. Like you mentioned, you got want to get it all in. I'm kind of like scheduling arranging my schedule already because I'm actually off from work next Friday.
Nice.
And then I will be taking another day off. So yeah, trying to get all those interviews scheduled. But one thing I say, I guess this is somewhat professional and personal. Um, I was challenged to post more on LinkedIn about a month or so ago.
Okay.
And so I've been really consistent with that, trying to post at least 3 days a week.
Mhm.
And it's been helpful to write my post ahead of time
Yeah.
and have my thoughts formulated before I even post. So, I haven't gone necessarily viral yet, but still, I appreciate those who do read my content and comment, react, or like. So I want to thank everyone out there in LinkedIn universe. Thank you so much for reading my content, and it's motivating me to keep going and keep writing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That viral trend will hit, I'm sure. I'm the same way. 3 times a week is usually what I aim for. And sometimes it's like the day before, I'm like, I got to write something down so I can tweak this 100 times before I actually post it the day of.
Exactly. Same here.
Awesome. So you and I connected. We're both in the recruiting space, and I had talked to you about joining the show, and what I like to ask in terms of recruiters that get into the industry is, I'm sure you get this question a lot because a lot of people are interested in what we do and how we got into the field, and it's kind of funny because it's always different. Some people just fell into recruiting. Some people knew like this is what I want to do. So for you, what did that journey look like? Was that something that you always kind of had in your mind, or was it more so just trial and error and you were all like sudden like, hey, I can do this. I'm going to try it out.
So, yeah, it totally by accident, completely. So, I actually was pursuing a career in the entertainment industry. I am from LA and I live in Los Angeles. So it's pretty typical if you are from the city to aspire to work in entertainment.
Mhm.
And I did that. And at one point, I was on a break from actually working on very low budget movies in their costume department
Okay.
wardrobe. So I was on a break, and the funny thing is, I probably should have really considered being a stylist as opposed to a costume designer because I can't sew. And that is something that is essential. If
Yeah.
you're going to be working on movie sets and TV sets, even though I did work on some, but still, I know how to sew. So I was on a break. I was temping at, of all places, the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office
Okay.
and their HR department. And funny enough, I don't know if this is still the case, but back then they had a marketing department. Yes, the LA County Coroner's Office has a marketing department, gift shop, and everything.
Wow.
And so the head of marketing was impressed by the work that I did. And what he told me is, well, I know your assignment's going to be over in a few weeks. You should talk to my wife. She is looking to hire an HR specialist. And it was a part of Los Angeles that I wasn't even all that familiar with, and it was in special education, and it was completely off the beaten path. I thought I was going to go back, and work in entertainment in some capacity because I had worked in entertainment PR, management, both in the music industry and in acting, well, and just various things I did. So I figured, well, I just go back to that. So I went on the interview. The HR director hired me as the HR specialist. A year later, a recruiter role became open, and I interviewed for that, and the rest is history. And I've been recruiting for a while now.
I haven't looked back then. So for you then, when it comes time to actually recruit and get talent in the door, how do you try to create a more personal candidate experience for anyone coming to you? Because that's kind of the thing recruiters have to look at is how can we stand out in the industry? There's a lot of agencies, internal recruiters, everyone kind of competing for this talent pool. So for you, what do you do to try to make it more about the candidate themselves to make them want to work with you as much as you want to work with them?
Sure. Well, initially, I think it's the messaging because I have mainly worked in environments where I'm required to source. And what that means is recruiters who have to go out and look for candidates, whether through its it's through LinkedIn Recruiter or Indeed or some of the other job boards, or and there are other methods, but that's a simple way of describing it.
Yeah.
So in my messaging, I try to make it personal and unique, even though working with a template, because even though we're in an interesting time, people are still getting bombarded with messages.
Absolutely.
And a lot of these people are passive, they're not actively seeking employment. So, specifically to LinkedIn Recruiter, I know you asked, how do I make it about them? But I think my LinkedIn profile definitely stands out too. So that gets attention
Sure.
at times. But I think really providing that great candidate experience, getting to know the candidate, especially if you're contacting someone who is passive, not making any assumptions that they should be grateful that you contacted them,
Right.
but also just asking, what was their motivation for wanting to even speak with me, and
Mhm.
go out of their way to agree to a conversation. Um, but once a person is in that process, definitely follow up is important.
Mhm.
If it's going, I always tell them initially in the conversation, when we get to a point where we decide is mutually agreeable, because I want them to know they're interviewing us just as much as we're interviewing them.
Right.
They
Right.
need to be happy, and my goal is to always accommodate candidates, whether it's, you know, scheduling or just when they can speak, if they are out of town or on vacation, understanding that we're not gonna ask them to interview while they're on vacation.
Right.
Trust me, I've heard that before.
Cool.
Um, and just also, even if things are going well or you assume they are, following up to make sure, hey, if you're talking to this really good candidate, there's a chance other people might be interested in them too. And just finding out if anything has changed through that process since you had that initial conversation, since they had their first interview, find out if their compensation requirements have changed or anything has changed in the process, and just really, even when they're in the background process, talking to them, finding out how they're doing all the way to their first day of employment, and even checking up with them after they've started just to see how things are going too
Yeah.
at the company.
Absolutely, absolutely. So then I'm sure you've seen a lot of the people, the big thing for them is there's a lot of applying to the jobs and then they get the interview, and unfortunately it's not happening a lot for many people. You see the frustration through LinkedIn and the posts of sending out the resumes but not getting the calls, just getting the rejection emails. So when they do get that interview, it's like sometimes that they get to that point where they almost psych themselves out. So when you're preparing a candidate, getting them ready for that next step, the interview, whether it's directly with you, with the hiring manager, what advice do you give to those candidates to just kind of get them back to the ease and comfort that they should be having in a conversation type of style interview, as opposed to feeling nervous going in like they only have one shot at this?
That's a great question, Matt. So, what I try to reiterate is what the hiring manager is looking for.
Mhm.
And then I will go over some of the things that this candidate shared with me. For example, you mentioned that, and I recruit a lot of salespeople, so I'll gear this towards sales. You mentioned that you're coachable, that you are competitive, but you're also a team player and things like that. And I might mention some of the things they told me. Well, this is what the manager's looking for. Let's say there was something that they might not have mentioned because maybe they were a little nervous when they spoke to me, or just they didn't think about it.
Mhm.
I like to share with them that this is something that you should really express during the interview. Talk about that a little more. Now, this is one thing I noticed. Sometimes salespeople, because they have big personalities, some of them will love to talk, and that's great. But at the same time, there's a thin line between being expressive and being long-winded.
Right.
So when I notice that a candidate is coachable and they hopefully will take my advice, I will mention to them in a very polite way that I appreciated everything you had to say, but our interview ran a little longer. So just make sure that you understand this is a 30-minute interview. You need to be as concise as possible. This manager is looking for someone who can express themselves in a very concise manner. So
Right.
just providing tips that I believe are helpful, but also tips that are specific to them and not just generic advice.
Sure, sure. Now, beyond the interview prep advice, the other advice a lot of candidates right now are seeking is on the resume itself. And so, for you, as someone who was a resume writer in a past role and kind of looks at them all day like I do, what are some things that you either try to coach them on when they're preparing their resume, or some things that you've seen that stood out to you as kind of this is a good practice for other people who are trying to retool their resume to embrace as well?
It's a great question. I was actually just speaking about this with someone earlier today. So I will gear this towards sales, but at the same time, this can apply to almost any position. So in sales, it is all about numbers and performance and things. I love when I see that on someone's resume
Mhm.
because it tells you, okay, I was at 137% in 2020, and I was at this number and that number, President's Club winner, things like that. Now,
Mhm.
someone might be wondering if they're not in sales, does that matter? Yes, it is important to provide information of how you were the solution to a problem or how you were able to accomplish things. And it could be from a metric standpoint. Um, and, you might have, let's say, if you're an office manager, maybe you found a more efficient way to get office supplies
Right.
and, and you cut down on costs, just anything that shows why you are the solution to your potential employer's problem. So I would say a very solutions based resume is great. Um, and this is advice that I'll give to anyone, but especially that demographic that might be, let's say, 40 and over, or they could be younger. Take the dates off of your resume, with education, that is, not employment dates, but education dates. Um, One thing I have observed through my years of recruiting is that there is ageism. I'm not saying every employer, but this happens, and people sometimes are dismissed. I'll give you a great example. Let's say someone is trying to transition into another field and they have that they worked in a role for like 15 or 20 years. That's great. But sometimes these unconscious bias or like, well, this person's not going to want this job. It's not going to pay them enough. A lot of assumptions are made. So what I tell people, if you stayed at a company for many years, that's great. But hopefully you experienced some sort of progression while you were there. You don't have to put every single role that you had at that company, even if it was, especially if it was like, let's say you were working there in the early 2000s. We don't need to know that. But if you had some sort of role for, let's say, the last 5 years over there, then that's what you put on your resume. So it is about, you always want to be truthful and transparent on your resume, but at the same time, you want to gear your resume towards the position you're looking for and also take out any things that could possibly be a barrier for you.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Now, another question I'll have, and this is kind of geared towards my network of transitioning teachers. So, as a former educator, I always try to assist them when it comes to transferable skills because you do a lot in the classroom that doesn't really pop out on a resume. The conflict resolution, selling yourself to 30, 18-year-olds, 15-year-olds, younger every day is kind of a hard thing to do. So, for you as someone who works a lot with sales candidates, and this is an industry that some teachers try to transition into, what are some of those skills that you've seen out of the successful sales candidates that you've placed that you would tell the teachers to kind of focus on in terms of this is what you should highlight on your resume if you're going to try to transition into a sales focused career?
Well, like you mentioned, conflict resolution. One thing that in sales, especially if we're talking your account executives, a lot of companies are looking for is it's not only the hard skills, but soft skills, high EQ, emotional intelligence. That is something that will get you far in a sales environment. A lot of teachers have to have emotional intelligence because depending on what grade you're teaching, a lot of times it can be challenging. Also, when you're dealing, and I'm not going to pretend I know everything about teachers and what they go through, but I know the teachers have to deal with parents, they have to deal with administrators, they have to deal with the school district, and a lot of, if I would say, bureaucratic issues. So, a lot of those things you can incorporate. Now, this is the advice I will give, and this is not, I'm not saying you shouldn't, let's say, for example, if you're a teacher, you shouldn't pursue something in a different industry. But one thing I've noticed when people try to transition into industries they know, sometimes they have the most success. For example, I've seen former teachers who go into ed tech or they are selling educational products because I've read those job descriptions. A lot of times these companies want former teachers to
Mhm.
sell their products because they can speak to it from a level that someone who does not have a background in education can do. Like I've told people who want to get into recruiting, who have worked in retail, try to become a recruiter in retail. That's the easiest transition because if you were even a store manager, you definitely already have experience hiring people and recruiting
Um,
people. So I would say that is probably one way to transition is to make sure it's an industry that you already have experience in. But I also encourage people, I never say limit yourself. Go for those other industries. Might be a little more challenging, but still, you might have a better chance in an industry that you're familiar with.
Absolutely, absolutely. So to kind of expand on that as my last question for you, and anyone who joins the show, I always have them share this anyway. So for you, what is some advice that you try to give to anyone that comes to you that's not just seeking a position in sales, but looking for insight on anything, their job hunt, transitioning from any industry to a new one? What's that piece of advice that you've always found is beneficial for you, so you pass that along when you can?
Sure. So one thing I'll say is important for everyone. Practice your interviewing skills. You may be someone who is very new to interviewing because you recently graduate from high school or college, or maybe you haven't interviewed in several years because you've worked for the same company and things are constantly changing and evolving. Um, I also would say if you are a hiring manager and you're looking for your next role or someone's approached you, practice interviewing. You'd be surprised at how many people who actually are hiring managers and interview people aren't always the best at it.
Mhm.
So practice does make perfect. I worked for the same employer for 10 years and unfortunately was laid off due to the pandemic. I hadn't interviewed in a while and I had to really brush up on my interviewing skills. So I would say continue to learn. Networking is a great tool. Now, I'm not going to tell you that, oh, you'll get your next job because you network.
Right.
No. But there are a lot of benefits to networking. You get to see different perspectives. You get to learn from others. Sometimes if you're willing to help others, they're willing to help you. I actually received one of my contract roles I had in 2020 because of networking and because I offered to help someone. So I would say be open, don't limit yourself either because recruiters still source, they use the job board, so utilize that too.
Mhm.
And I would say do your research and ask people who are in industries that you are interested in. Have conversations with them. Not everyone's going to accommodate you, but there are a lot of people who will have those coffee chats with you.
Absolutely. Yep. Fantastic advice. I always try to push for the networking, and I know it's tough for for some people. Change is scary. Putting yourself out there is not the easiest thing to do, but like you said, you'll find a lot of people that are just as ready to kind of be on board with you and celebrate your success when you get there once you've introduced yourself to them. So that's it for us this week. If you are not connected with Joi yet, make sure you hit that connect button, the Joyful Recruiter. I appreciate so much, again, you taking some time out of your day to speak with me, give some insight in terms of not just the recruiting industry, but some advice to those looking to find a new position as well. We hope everyone has a great week ahead, and we'll see you next Monday.
Bye.